Okay, in this video, I'm going to go through all of the calculations in Excel for the project warm-up quiz for confidence interval estimates. Let's start with question 1 for the confidence interval estimate for a mean. We'll be working on the provided Q1 Ville-Marie listings sheet. So the first step when working with a sample mean problem is to use the data analysis toolpack and run the descriptive statistics for the column of interest. You could just calculate the sample mean, sample standard deviation, and sample size using Excel functions and the price column. However, the summary statistics also gives you the margin of error for the confidence level as well, so that can really speed up your time to complete a problem like this. So you're going to go ahead and click on the data ribbon, and you're going to look for the data analysis toolpack. That's going to pop up a window here. You're going to locate descriptive statistics. I'm going to click on OK. Now we're going to do our input range, and we're going to select the price column here, which is column C. You always want to check that labels box in first row because it does say price in C1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check the summary statistics. Now I always just leave this as new worksheet just to put it on a new worksheet just to make that easier in dealing with the output. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And so you can see here that we have an output. And so I'm going to go back to the sheet. I've already run that before, so that's the same output here. So the first thing in A, we want to identify the sample size or N. So we can see that the output gives us that, but they call it count. So this is going to be our sample size. Next is we're going to be looking for the sample mean for the price column. So it's also given to us here. So 142.05 is the answer for B. Next, for C, we're looking for the sample standard deviation. Well, that's also given to us right here as 211.08. Now, I mentioned it gives us the margin of error. So if we go down to the bottom, it gives us a confidence level for 95%. So I didn't change the default there. So you do want to make sure that if your problem is a 95% confidence interval estimate, you would need to change that input. But here is the margin of error, 5.5651. So you actually see that that is the answer for E down here. So the descriptive statistics gave us almost everything we needed for this question except for the T critical value. So in order to calculate the T critical value, I'm going to go ahead and plug in 0.95 for our confidence level here. And then I need to calculate the degrees of freedom. So that's going to be our sample size minus 1. And then next we can calculate our T critical value. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to go over to our chapter 8 resources. And I'm going to go to the bottom here. This is the section for finding the critical T value when the population standard deviation is unknown. So that is the situation for this problem. So we could see that we're going to be using the tinv.2t function. And then the probability is going to be the 1 minus the confidence level. And then we'll need the degrees of freedom. So I'll input equals t.inv.2t, and then I'm going to input 1 minus j2 for 0.95 for our confidence level, and then I'm going to reference the cell for the degrees of freedom, and we get a t critical value of 1.96. Let's quickly just validate that the output that Excel gave us is correct. So we'll just do t times the standard error. So you notice how Excel gave us the standard error in the summary statistics as well. We could calculate that ourselves by using the sample standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. So as you can see, we get 5.5651, and that matches up to the answer that the summary statistics gave us. So here's a screenshot of all 5 answers for question 1 for finding the confidence interval estimate for a mean. Okay, let's move over to the Q2-accommodates count pivot sheet. So for question 2 in the confidence interval quiz, we need to calculate a confidence interval for the proportion of listings in Ville-Marie that accommodates 3 or more people. It was given in the problem that the confidence level is 95%. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in 95% here. So next in A, we need to identify the sample size or N. So we know from the first problem that the sample size is 5529, but we could also see that in the grand total of the pivot table here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the sample size of 5529 there. Now, next, we need to identify our variable or attribute of interest. That is denoted by x, and we know that that accommodates greater than or equal to 3. So one thing we could do is we could actually click on and highlight from 3 to 18 and go to the bottom, and Excel will give you a sum. So that's 3241. So you notice though, I actually got a little fancy with it. I'm using the sum if function, and I'm summing up column B if column A is greater than or equal to 3. So you can see that that actually gives you the same answer. Here is the formula for the P bar or sample proportion. So it's going to be X over N. So if I click here, I'm just doing that calculation here by referencing the cells. So next we need to calculate the Z critical value. So I'm going to go to our chapter 8 resources again, and I'm going to locate the area where it indicates to find the critical Z value. So we can see we have this function right here. I'm going to input equals ABS. So ABS is the absolute value function. So we want to take either the negative or positive and convert it to a positive. And then norm.s.inv, and then 1 minus E2. So the input is the probability. So we need the alpha and not the confidence level. So that's why we do 1 minus E2 and then divided by 2. And we get 1.96. So that's going to be the answer for C. So finally, we just need to calculate the margin of error for the sample proportion. And here is that formula here. So if I click here, you can see we take E6, which is the Z critical value, times the square root of the sample proportion times 1 minus the sample proportion divided by the sample size. If you're doing this in Excel, you want to make sure that you're using your parentheses in the right spot so it has the order of operations done correctly. And we get 0.0130. So that's our answer here. Well, that wraps up this video on calculating confidence intervals for a mean and a proportion for our project warm-up quiz.